You're listening to the Oven Podcast. Your table is ready. You can follow me.
I'm Mario. This is Franco. We're back at Jackson's in Comac. We got Chef Harry Poole in the kitchen doing his thing once again. Tonight, the oven's preheated. We're about to sit down with an editor from Northeast Leaf Magazine, also host of Grow Bud Yourself podcast. His name is Danko, and we're about to get into some good food tonight. We're starting with jumbo mozzarella sticks with pesto marinara. The pesto is going to be the infusion on the app. Barbecue baby back ribs, crumbled gorgonzola, and a creamy coleslaw. That's our entree. The barbecue is going to be the infusion on that. Last, we have a brownie battered fried Twinkie. Some don't know Twinkie was Franco's nickname in middle school. That comes with a little caramel and chocolate syrup. And the syrups are the infusion for the dessert. I'm ready to get after it.
All right, Danko's here. He's a couple Guinness deep. We're about to get the start in the oven. How you been?
I'm good. Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're going to jump right into it. I want to ask you how it all started, how you ended up part of the cannabis community. It's a tough question.
Yeah, no, it's a long story.
We got time.
It is a long story, but from the first moment that I tried cannabis, I fell in love and became a true believer. And it just, I really felt the vibe. Like I felt like this was something really special. And there was a lot of other options out there in the world, and cannabis to me just seemed like the best option. And I started smoking, then you start buying a little extra because you want yours to be free, and your friends might pay a little extra. And then and then I realized you can grow it. And it was like an epiphany for me that because you thought maybe you needed like fields in South America or something to grow weed. It didn't make sense, but like you could do it just in a closet, and you could have a higher quality and something that you knew everything that went into it, like nutrients, overfeeding, overwatering, pesticides, and all that. And the strain was right, the right strain for you, and pennies to the dollar as far as what it costs, and it's fun. It's enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of us who are like true believers, like nothing beats homegrown. So I don't know. It just and I that led to a job at High Times as a cultivation writer and editor, and then I got to travel all around the world, smoking all different cannabis from Barcelona to Amsterdam to Vancouver and LA and Northern Cali and everywhere else in the world. As I just got to go to all these places, and it's a wonderful healing flower, and I think people need to understand that. Like the stigma's got to go away, and So long story short, I'm a true believer. It's a plant that saves lives. It's a healing flower. And the whole idea of cannabis prohibition was just such a huge, awful mistake, and with really awful repercussions and injustices, big and small.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it just sounds like, the hobby, something you really truly cared about, turned into a career and something you really believe in, which is awesome.
Yeah. And it happened in stages. First you kind of you fall in love, and then it becomes kind of like something to make money. Then I discovered Jack Herer and, the fact that this was an amazing plant, and not just, a way to make money, but also, there had to be a political change. We had to kind of stop locking people up and ruining people's lives over this plant. So that, that was important too. And so that discovery, becoming more political about it, and then, having a career at High Times, teaching people how to grow, from the early days when, this was not legal or allowed at all, but still, the goal was always overgrow the government, just grow enough and teach people that, this plant is maligned and it's been ostracized in this weird way and lumped together with these awful other things, which all, should technically all be legal in the end. But at the same time, let's separate, plant medicine from, some of the more harmful and addictive narcotics. And so, I don't know, cannabis to me is it's a healing thing, and it's also something that brings people together. From all my travels, I've noticed, like, you can go to a place, you don't speak the same language, you might not be the same religion, all these things, are in conflict, seemingly, but at the same time, put your fingers together.
Everyone knows that.
Make that sign, and you find the right people and the right vibe and the right crowd, and it brings people together.
Quick.
Quick, and all around the world. So, and like I said, I've met so many people who've swore up and down to me that this plant saved their lives, and they tell me, thank you for working to change these laws and make a change and teach people about this plant. There's so much more to learn, I think,
We got a long way to go.
Yeah. I mean, and we're only scratching the surface. Yep. There's so much to learn from this plant. And, but now that things are changing, everybody complains it's getting corporate, it's getting this, it's getting that. It's still better than going to jail. It's still better than having your house invaded by, a SWAT team.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the big man's always got to make his money.
Yeah, but we have home grow, and we have an alternative. We're in a weird time, right? It's like in between. Some states are legal, some states are medical, some states are this. We don't have any federal anything. You can go to jail in Texas for growing, but you could be a millionaire in Colorado, 50 miles away. We're in this very strange time, globally, nationally, and here in New York as well. Mm-hmm. Everything's, this weird Wild West kind of feeling of, okay, well, the laws are different there, the laws are different here. We can't put our money in the bank. We can't, so, but in the end, years from now, the fact that we're not locking people up, the fact that we're not filling prisons and all this stuff up with people who are nonviolent cannabis growers and enthusiasts is going to be huge. And the medical thing, the lab testing, the things that they're finding out about the terpenes and the cannabinoids and flavonoids and all that, that is going to be huge and monumental, and hopefully, I think, help change and help people and change lives, save lives, and help people live longer and better lives.
So,
yeah, I see it in the future, but we're here in this moment where things are just wild, right? It's wild, right? Yeah. Licensed, unlicensed, legacy, illegal, legal. Like this bud's legal, but this bud here is illegal. It's the same thing, I mean, that's what's weird about this moment, but it's also interesting and fun and exciting. And, for me being, decades deep in this thing, it's like, people told me 20 or 30 years ago, it'll never be legal.
Yep.
Why bother? You're wasting your time. The government won't allow it. It'll never happen. Or if they do allow it, it'll be corporate and all those other things. And yeah, of course, that's going to happen and all that. But I want to go to a farmer's market and purchase a jar of homegrown, organic, living soil cannabis, maybe some rosin and, some edibles, properly created infused foods, topicals, all that. And then for people who are medical patients, I mean, you got to think about how many amazing applications this plant has for them, right? People talk about the munchies, and they joked about this for years. Pot gives you the munchies. If there was a pharmaceutical that helps you eat and hold down food when you have like AIDS wasting syndrome or cancer or something, that's $1 billion industry right there.
And here it is.
And we have it. Yeah.
And
we've been joking about it
the whole time.
Well, we've been joking about it, but the reality is an appetite, something that boosts your appetite And the same plant can actually reduce appetite if you isolate, other terpenes and cannabinoids. This plant has so many functions for people. So I do think it's kind of a miracle. I sound like
The day has come.
an evangelist, but the reality is, it's like, I mean, I'm 50 years old, and almost 40 of those years, people have been telling me that this plant helps them and saves lives, and sometimes they got tears in their eyes, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this thing, so. That's
and like you said, I mean, we're just scratching the surface on that too. So, there's just, isn't it crazy, like, to think like where it started and, how much research is done in the last 30, even in the last, 10 years?
Yeah. And there's so much more to do. I mean, most of the research has been kind of wrong-headed government research, where they're only going to get the money if they give you the result that they want, which is kind of a negative result. So, we shoved, thousands of milligrams of THC down this rat's throat until it, killed the rat. Well, THC kills rats. That's the studies that they've had in the past. But now we have the freedom, hopefully. And, in Europe, they're doing this, in Spain and in Israel and other places. They're doing the research. And I think we need to do it too, before we get left behind, If other countries are going to do it, Canada has federal legalization, which we don't have here in the U.S. So they have $100 million companies that are out there exporting cannabis to Germany and other places. We can't do that. We can't even move cannabis from state to state legally. We can't even put cannabis money in the bank. We're in this weird time.
Yeah, it's like a spiral over here, right?
Right. And New York especially, like, what a weird time here. They legalized 2 years ago. Now, only just in the last month or so, they've had the licenses and that have a couple of shops have opened.
Yeah.
But
literally,
what's going to happen in 2 years? Of course, unlicensed places are going to open. People are going to fill the void. You made a void. You created a vacuum.
Yep.
And people are going to fill that vacuum. And in New York, it's interesting too. I mean, we have such a rich history in this state, going back to like the 40s. I mean, like the jazz era with Louis Armstrong and Mesro, and reefers that they were buying and selling up in Harlem. And really, cannabis was one of those things that brought people from downtown uptown and mixed the cultures. And that's why New York and the diversity of this city is so special and important. But even for cannabis, it's like that, because it came originally through New Orleans, and the jazz musicians worked their way up to New York and Chicago and places. But then, we had the 60s and the 70s. Here in New York in particular, we had, the Yippies, Dana Beal, and like that whole crew. We had the Pope of Dope. And like
the Pope of Dope?
Yeah, the Pope of Dope.
That
was in the 80s. You could call the 1-800 number and get a weed delivered to you. We had, all these bodegas and weed spots and everything that were popping up in the late 80s and early 90s. And then Giuliani came, that he shut down the weed spots. So then we had the delivery services. That all started right here in New York. The whole the idea of a delivery service that would bring you 2 grams of weed for $50 to your crib.
Sold.
Yeah, sure. But it was high quality, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing. New York, people will pay top dollar.
Exactly.
So, this became a place where you could sell your pounds for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 at that time. And then, then the haze uptown, the sour diesel,
which both seem like they're making their way back, huh?
I hope, that's part of our legacy as a city, as a state, and the whole, Northeast in general. That's kind of what my mission now is, just to get people to understand what we have, our culture here, and the underground, the legacy market, the history, all of it is really special, and it's something we should preserve. And something, if people are branding this or branding that, like, brand that, brand our thing. I love Cali weed. I love Colorado weed. I love it all. But we also have our thing, and we need to like keep our thing our thing.
That's it. Especially like you said, New York could be the mecca for, really all of it.
I mean, I predict billions and billions of dollars in New York, illegal, real legal, like not heavily overregulated, overtaxed the way that some states can be. But the way our law is written, I think it's, it's, the room is there, I think, and with consumption lounges.
Oh, I can't wait for those, man.
I know, I'm saying this New Amsterdam, this was New Amsterdam before it was New York, and it could be New Amsterdam again.
Yep. Oh, definitely. I like that.
It already kind of is, honestly. Yeah. And we all know consumption lounges we can go to, but certainly want to be able to go without the fear or the stigma.
Of course.
That's ultimately where we want to get.
And these consumption lounges, man, they could be like the bowling alley around the corner. It could be your hair salon. Like, and literally anything. So it's like the options are endless, which is so cool.
I'm looking forward to seeing how that all pans out, And
I feel like that's way down the road though, right?
Well, I mean, way down the road, it could be, 18 months.
Yeah, I guess I get it.
It goes by in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no,
the older
right.
you get, the quicker it passes by. But again, like this city, this state, this region in general, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, the whole region has so much culture and history built already into it. It doesn't, we don't need too much of an outside influence.
I agree.
And I think, and it's unique. It's unique.
And like you said, man, a lifetime goes like this, right? So, born in Russia, correct?
Yeah, born. Well, it was the Soviet Union.
Okay, Soviet Union. Sorry, born in the Soviet
now
Union.
Russia.
Okay, born in the Soviet Union.
Born in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg.
Okay, and then came over to Boston, right?
Well, originally New York, and then lived in Houston, Texas for a little while. Basically grew up in Boston from about age 12 on.
Okay.
And Boston is where I discovered cannabis.
Yep.
I went to boarding school. Don't send your kids to boarding school if you don't want them doing drugs.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm just joking.
You're serious.
I was definitely known as kind of like the weed guy from, the first few. I started smoking, and then I realized like I can't afford this, without buying extra and then
that's how it all starts, man.
Selling some to friends. Yeah, it starts and then it gets bigger and bigger. And then I had that epiphany. I discovered growing. My friend showed me a grow room he had, which was literally a closet with a 400-watt light. But he was getting this incredible bud out of there, like a quarter pound every 3 months out of this tiny closet of this beautiful bud. And it was so much better than anything else
that you're smoking.
You could smoke at the time. I mean, I'm talking about, 89, 90, around that time. So there was really, Mexican.
You're not talking like Acapulco.
If it was
gold,
green,
right?
you were happy. If your weed was green, that was a good sign. If it didn't have seeds, that was a great sign.
Even better.
Yeah. So, there's the Arizona and the Mexi and that stuff. But this was a whole different level. This was like deadhead level. We would do like little bong hits of like just one little,
and you're ready to
grain of it, and that was enough, to send you out.
So is that where like the passion came from? Is that where like the passion for growing came?
For growing, for sure. I mean, because that's when I realized this. You didn't need, a lot of space to do this, and now I try to teach people like, sure you can grow in 100,000 square foot warehouse. But if there's one thing I've learned from all the grow rooms I've ever visited, the best weed comes out of the 4x4 tent.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's because it's just cared for. It's too hard to do it on a large scale. If you're going to enter a cup, or you're going to like, try to, fill a jar for a connoisseur, aficionado, or even a medical patient.
Okay.
You want it to be that just perfect quality.
Definitely.
And that can't be done on a huge, large scale. It's just the drying, the curing, all the meticulous time that you take with every plant, hand watering and all that, hand feeding. that, you can't replicate that at scale. It's just too hard. So all the stuff you can find out there, and that's fine. Like, people should have access to, vape pens and all that stuff too. But for those of us who really appreciate quality flower, quality, solventless concentrates, and that for that, small batch, local,
Craft.
sun-grown craft cannabis.
Yep.
It's got to be.
So how old were you when you discovered this? When you discovered grow, if you don't mind me asking.
Well, smoking, I was probably like, 13 or so.
Okay.
Too young, I have a son that age now. I wouldn't recommend that for him, but growing, I think I was like 17, 18. My buddy John Spar, he showed me his closet. I remember it forever because he had the weed plants up above, and down below, for some reason, there was like a big pumpkin growing inside there too. I think years later, he told me like the pumpkin leaves would get the pests first. It was like a canary in the coal mine kind of thing.
Really?
But at the time, I was like, why would you waste time growing a pumpkin in here? And then,
there's so many little.
I know people use beans for that too. Yep. But he used a pumpkin. And so that was the epiphany. That's what got me interested in growing. And then the political thing was, going over to Amsterdam, being in a coffee shop, ordering weed off a menu, being treated like a customer, and like civilized. Like, I could just sit here and drink a coffee, roll up a spliff, light it up,
hang out,
watch the, bicycles go by. And, it all just felt right. It felt like the way it should be. And I was like, this is the way we gotta bring this back home.
Yeah. And
even the Dutch people would say the same thing. Like, it doesn't have to only be here. Bring this home. Bring this to your home. And, and everyone said it was impossible and it would never happen. And yet here we are. It's happening. So, and that was the feeling. It was like, here's this wonderful plant that makes people feel good. And I feel good here right now. And all the stigma isn't there. All the paranoia, all that BS that comes along with it. And yet it's not that way back home.
Yeah.
So let's change the laws back home and change the laws worldwide. I mean, there's places where you can still be executed for cannabis.
Which is so crazy.
For possession
which is so
of cannabis.
crazy to think about.
Executed. Dead ass. And I mean, that's insane. Try, go to, Singapore or, one of those type of places, and, they'll kill you.
Yeah, Bali, I remember, like the electric chair.
Oh, yeah.
That you get caught with pot.
Meanwhile, there's like surfers from Australia, and there's places you can go to smoke, but God forbid, one time one cop catches you, boom, that's it. Your life is over. And we have those people here too. We have people locked up here for non-violent marijuana offenses. So to me, that's important too. Let's free those people. Let's continue to promote home grow, because home grow is the way you can get the quality that I'm talking about. And social use, consumption lounges and places where we can consume, that's important too. And medical, of course, but medical is like, that's the foundation. That's how this all happened to begin with, is Dennis Perone and, the LGBT community in San Francisco, in Oakland. That was like ground zero for cannabis legalization, because they realized that, these pot brownies were helping people live.
Yeah.
And that was like, we have to continue, we have to spread this worldwide. And so that's where, the kernels of that medical world started. But people have been screaming about legalization since before that too, since the 60s. And even before that, we saw this with alcohol. They did the same thing. That lasted 13 years, but it was a tragedy. It was awful. It was a huge mistake, and
another mistake.
Everybody realized it, 13 years, but people went to jail. People's lives were destroyed. And you could do the same now. You make cigarettes illegal, and people will kill each other over cartons of cigarettes.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what the product is. If there's a demand, there will be a supply. And
that's what we were talking about before. Yep. 100%. I got one last question before we get into appetizers. So we're actually doing a Euro trip next year. And
This year, I think.
no, next year.
Oh, it's next year.
Yeah, next year, 2024. It's for my mom's 60th.
Oh, nice.
So she put the planning on me. So like where we're going to go. And I told her we're starting in Amsterdam. And she was like, I don't know, but I need you to let her know that is where we have to start that trip off.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I'll tell you why. Because, you start there, and Amsterdam isn't just, a weed paradise or whatever. There's amazing museums. It's a beautiful city. There's canals. There's that. There's the red light district. That's something to see.
Little drink.
But there's amazing. It's a historic place, and it's a great place to start. I mean, it's the edge of Europe too,
Mm-hmm.
and you can stock up on your
And start taking
cannabis
and take the train everywhere.
and then you take the train. Just be smart about how you're taking things from country to country, because they still do have some checkpoints here and there. But all those places, like Italy, France, Germany, those are not places you want to try to score.
Yeah,
You're not going to get any kind of quality. You're going to get soap bar hash and diluted, like, swaggy mids, and you're going to pay way too much. And if you're lucky, basically, because it's those. So yeah, I would say start in Amsterdam and then, work your way all around, enjoy all of Europe. There's some amazing places. Spain also is a great place, cannabis wise in Europe. But the rest of Europe, it's tough. Like, there's medical in some places here and there, but for a tourist, it's tough. For a traveler. So I would say, Amsterdam's a great entry point, and then, but yeah, enjoy Europe. It's a wonderful place to visit, and if you find the right people in the right places, like I said, anywhere you can find. The vibe.
Always. Just right here.
Right? You put the two fingers together.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Holland. Yeah, I've been there so many times. From High Times, we would go every year for Cannabis Cup. And so I know it very well. My wife knows Paris very well, so we want to do a trip where I show her Holland and she shows me France.
Nice.
And then we can kind of also see Spain and maybe a little Italy as well. But I love Spain, and Spain has a great cannabis culture.
Okay.
As well, for sure. A lot of the Dutch people kind of move their operations to Spain because the weather's better and it's a little even more tolerant in some ways. There's a lot of private clubs where you can smoke and chill.
I didn't have Spain on the list, so
Spain is amazing.
You didn't have Spain on the list? You're planning and Spain wasn't on the list. I think of party as soon as I think of Spain.
Yeah, my mom's 60th. Party, Spain.
Well, if you can't get all the way down to Barcelona, San Sebastian and Bilbao in the north area near France are amazing.
Okay.
In the Basque Country. And that's really like kind of like the NorCal of Spain or Europe in general. Like everybody grows and
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of
I was trying to sneak some
great
in there.
food. Great food, great weed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. You ready to eat?
Sure. Yeah.
Got that appetizer coming out?
Absolutely.
You're listening to the Oven Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, so we got this ginormous mozzarella stick. Let's get into it.
You want to do the
I'll do the
favors?
honors. I'll do the honors.
Do the honors?
Wow.
Yes, we got a giant mozzarella stick, infused marinara sauce.
That's awesome.
I shouldn't have let him cut. Usually.
No, this is for him.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a gentleman. I'm a
That's
gentleman.
huge.
That's what she said. Not to me ever, but.
No, last time that we let him cut, he cut the steak at the steakhouse and took a nice T-bone steak, 10 pieces, like 5 of us. He has the 4 middle pieces on his plate. Dude.
The infusion.
Oh, absolutely. Wow.
Mix this up a little bit. A little pesto marinara.
Why not? How you doing?
I'm not keto this week.
No. Oh, man, that is really good.
I'm be all right with this marinara, right?
Yeah, no, it'll be fine. So the whole meal will probably be right around like 25, 30 milligrams. I want to make it where you're not
Right.
hating
Go
yourself
crazy.
after the meal.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's good. I mean, it's weird because there's the unregulated where you could have like 1,000 milligrams in one little thing, and then there's regulated where it's 5 milligrams, and you need to eat a whole,
Yeah, a whole sleeve of it.
chocolate bar.
It's like who wants 1,000? Who wants 1,000 milligrams at once though? Like,
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, that's for people. I think that's like a medical patient kind of
That's what I was gonna say.
situation only, pretty much, unless you're like super, constantly
Just,
medicated all the
day.
time.
Do they have like, how they make like extended release capsules for like Tylenol or something? Do they have like extended release THC?
Well, I do think that, like we talked about this, whether it's in butter or oil or like now they have that nanotechnology.
Oh yeah.
Which, it comes on quicker.
Uh-huh.
It hits you quicker, but then it kind of wears off quicker too. Whereas if it's in oil or butter, it'll take longer to take effect,
Okay.
but it'll also last a bit longer as well. So it might be 45 minutes before you feel it, but then it might be 2 or 3 hours before it wears off.
Right. And at that 45-minute mark, it might be punching you in the face. That's
Right. And I think that has to do with like whether it's going through your liver, or
Soft tissue,
brain-blood barrier.
Exactly. It's how you're metabolizing everything.
Right.
And the nano powder, like you said, we were talking about this before. The nano powder or now they actually do a liquid form, that's like water soluble, which is awesome. So instead of using like tinctures for drinks, this nano powder you can pour in any drink that you want, and it's for people who want to, not necessarily for just these people, but it's huge for people who want to like get back into working out. They're very lung conscious, guys that are going for runs. So we can tap into that the healthy market now with marijuana, which is awesome. So many different things that you can be making powders, protein powders, anything. So
yeah, I've been taking hemp protein powder, that's hemp derived, and it's great. It's a good alternative, because there's other reasons why some other protein powders have like issues, and hemp protein is like a really good protein.
Oh yeah.
Also too, cannabis and recovery go hand in hand for a
Hand
lot
in
of
hand,
people.
literally.
So if you can tap into that athlete or bodybuilder market with something like that, that would be tremendous.
Yeah, and I do feel like there's a lot of that happening. Sports, people from the MMA world and, people from NFL and all that, they're coming around to understanding that, like, these team doctors are giving us all these opiates and things, and they just want to get us back out there, but, like, we want to get back out there strong.
Exactly.
And healthy, and, cannabis can help.
Yeah,
And
so you
now
don't end up back in that spot.
Right.
And you hear these athletes come out and say, especially retired athletes, are like, they were pushing pills on me, these doctors, and I wish they would have pushed cannabis. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten addicted to something like pills.
Definitely. I mean, like you said, all these athletes now, but it was tough because the 4 major sports, they were testing for pot.
Right.
But MLB, I want to say MLB was the first one that came out and stopped testing like their professional athletes. And then so like if you were in like the AAA, single A, double A, you were getting tested. But if you're in the majors, you weren't. But then it went to NBA, then the NFL. Like,
yeah, and those guys all know, like, when they're rookies, they're going to get tested, and then hopefully, you're not going to get tested unless you have some type of incident or something like that. Spoken to a lot of those guys, and like, it's so hypocritical because they can drink all the alcohol that they want, and they can take all the pills that they want, and no one bats an eyelash. But the second they test positive for cannabis, they get like suspended.
Yeah.
I met, Ricky Williams and all these guys, and they were like, by the way, everyone smokes weed in all these things. Like, it's rare to find someone who doesn't. They're just smart about it, and they know when the test is going to happen, and they know how to beat the test, and they this and that and the other. But the idea is like, it's not performance enhancing. Why are you testing for it? Why is it an issue? It's really crazy, and I don't know. I just think It's important when these athletes come out and talk about it, though. You talked about after they retire, but while they're doing it, it's important.
While they're on the main stage.
Yeah, to talk about it as well. I mean, I'm glad they come out after, but come out while you're doing it. And also, you know, it's like we can talk to people all day. I'm like, you know, they're just like, oh, that's that hippie stoner guy. But when people hear it from an athlete or a veteran or someone that's elderly who has been through it and, like, you know, beaten cancer or whatever it is, it has more gravitas. Like it weighs more.
Yeah, it holds more weight.
And so they listen, you know, because they don't want to hear it from me. I'm like the pot evangelist, you know what I mean? But if they hear it from someone they respect that plays on the pro team that they cheer for, or the guy who goes and kills Bin Laden, you know, or whatever, then they're like, oh shit.
Yeah,
you know,
it's real.
This, you know, and then the stigma goes away.
It resonates a little better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This stigma is BS. This has been a medicine for thousands of years. Only since 1930s, basically, after they ended alcohol prohibition, they prohibited cannabis because they needed something new to prohibit.
Yeah, to just control.
Yeah, and then they had all the reasons to do it. It was like Mexicans and this and that, and the jazz musicians. Yeah, let's make that illegal.
Devil.
Yeah, alcohol is not illegal anymore, so let's make this illegal. And not only that, but now it gets us in everybody's pocket. Now I can search this person, I can get in their pocket, and you know, it's clearly this total BS thing. But it's prior to that, it was in all the medicines. Eli Lilly and Bayer and all the pharmaceutical companies and everybody had cannabis medicines. And prior to that, I mean, we're talking about cultures, hash making cultures that go back since before Christianity.
Forever.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, in the Middle East and in Afghanistan and places like that, they've been making hash out of cannabis for all different reasons. You know, for people to get high, but also for, you know, menstrual cramps and for, you know, all kinds of different things that it treats. And the idea that, like, the last 70 or 80 years can negate all those thousands and thousands of years of history and culture and all that, it's crazy. You know?
Oh, we've
been brainwashed, or not we, but those among us
as a whole
around us. Yeah. And
you know, we talked about it before. I'm sure you get this question, you know, all the time. But you know, federal legalization, you know, they have it in other countries, obviously not here yet. And New York is slowly, obviously, rolling out their regulations. But when do you see, like, where do you see the marijuana market in 5 years from now?
Well, that's a good question, and a lot of it depends on what happens federally. Because if we can get some kind of federal legalization in the next 2 years or so, and the banking kicks in and all that, that would be very helpful for the businesses, you know, and for interstate, you know, commerce, and for a lot of that. But if it takes 5 years, each state is different, and all these states are making all this money. I mean, look, just driving out here from Brooklyn to Long Island, all these potholes in the road, I'm like, for the amount of taxes that I pay, there should not be any potholes in the road.
Yeah.
Like, there really shouldn't. You know, we all pay all these taxes. Why are there potholes in the road? I don't need, you know, $50 million airplanes to, like, you know, spy on this and that and the other. I want, like, a road without potholes, you know? And I don't know.
Are we asking too much? Fuck.
It's tired of spilling coffee on the shirt.
It doesn't sound crazy, but if you go to Colorado,
no, really,
the taxes that they've gotten from legal cannabis has paid for, like, schools to be built and potholes to be filled and all these things that have helped them out. Now, you might not see it on a daily basis, but it's there, and, like, it helps.
I was just in Colorado. It was the craziest thing to me. I didn't know this was a thing. Okay. I'm driving on some highway across Colorado, going from Denver to the hot springs in Glenwood Springs. It was like maybe like a 2.5 hour ride, 3 hour ride, I forget what it was. But it's all fucking down the mountain. It's all downhill. And they have truck runaway ramps that just veer off to the side. I guess if the brakes on a truck break or fail, they just veer off and hope that the truck stops as it goes up the mountain.
Right.
That was pretty wild to me. I don't know.
That's so they eventually just stop.
Yeah, I guess like as you're going downhill, it veers off to the right and it just goes up. And I guess it's just hope for the best.
Right.
Have you seen that before?
Yeah. It's basically so they don't just careen down the mountain.
You just,
If they lose brakes. But again, taxes pay for that.
yeah.
Somebody has to build that and like put that in place. And we pay enough for that to happen. It just seems crazy that it's not happening. So I think, cannabis is overregulated. It's overtaxed. It's over everything. The legal market. And everybody complains about, it's, corporate and legal and this and that. But I don't know if they're always seeing all the benefits, and I do think 2 years and 5 years from now, especially with New York being a multi-billion-dollar market, we're going to see tremendous benefits from cannabis legalization. Again, I don't necessarily want to buy a vape pen at an Apple store.
No.
I'm going to go to my local.
Well, they're going to charge your arm and a leg for a new charger.
But I do think that market should exist for people that want that. The soccer mom that just wants, a gummy, and great. That's good for her. But I want high quality flour and concentrates that I can buy locally and all that. So if all that exists, I think we'll be in a good place. I just think in some places it's weird, in some states they don't have home grow. Even Jersey doesn't have home grow. Just across the river from us,
which is crazy.
They have legal cannabis, but they don't have home grow. So you can only buy it from the dispensary. I think that's short-sighted. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but you need it all. You need home grow. You need social use. We need to expunge all the records and release all the prisoners and move beyond. It's a plant that can help and heal, let it do its thing. We're holding the plant back right now. And so as far as your question though, federal legalization, I would hope that it would happen within the next 5 years. Certainly the banking part of it, certainly interstate trafficking. I mean, look at, some states have droughts and some states have gluts. It doesn't make any sense that it's illegal to ship extra from Oregon or California to, Illinois or Iowa or wherever because they don't have enough.
Yeah, because
it's there. It exists. So are you going to get rid of it and destroy it? We're America. We're the United States of America. Let's unify our law.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to leave the federal and, come back to New York, do you see, us heading in the right direction for, if you're growing your own, flower at home, will you be able to be, self-sufficient and not depend on, the dispos and everywhere else? You think that they're going to let us, really let the home grower do that?
I do. I mean, I think ultimately, how can they stop it? If it's legal for a corporation to grow it, how can it not be legal for a person to grow it? That's ultimately, it just doesn't make any sense. If you're going to have a brewery and you're going to brew beer and sell it, yeah, sure, you got to license it and pay taxes and this and that and the other. But if I want to brew beer in my home and just bottle it up and give it away to friends and share it and stuff, nobody can stop me from that. So it's the same kind of idea. It's not everybody wants to go through all the trouble, but if you care like we do and you want the highest quality, you're going to seek it out from the people who do it properly. And the only way to do it at that level properly is on a smaller scale than the big corporations are doing. So I do think ultimately when it all pans out, now this might be after we're long gone, but when it all pans out, the idea that it's legal makes it kind of silly to think, oh, well, they can do it, but you can't, and I can do it better than they can. So and it's the same thing with pickles. I mean, you can buy pickles at the store for $5 in a jar, or you can grow cucumbers and make your own pickles, and it's pennies to the dollar, but the pickles are better and they're crispier and they're homemade and they're your pickles. And if I want to trade my pickles with the guy down the street, then I want to, it's.
I don't want any of your pickles.
We got to get back to that though
pickles,
a little
man.
bit, like
Definitely.
that whole kind of barter system thing. When it comes to a connoisseur quality product, that's the way to go. I mean, cigars or wine or anything else, it's the same way. If you really care about wine, you'll spend extra money on a fancy bottle of wine. Or you can go and buy a box of wine at the Costco.
Yeah, it's 7-Eleven.
Or if you like cigars, you can get Phillies and it's $1 or $2 for a pack of 5. But you really like cigars, you want a Cuban, and you might pay $15 or $20 for one cigar.
Yep.
But are you a connoisseur? Same with coffee, same with anything. Like if you're a true believer and you care, you want the best. And the best can only be achieved, in a small
batch, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why, so all in all, it's like if I was to say, why should you grow your own bud? You would just say, because simply it's, if done right, it's a better product.
Yeah. Well, it's also fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's enjoyable. Like imagine a fish tank, like where you're taking care of the fish all the time, but then eventually the fish take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know,
The fish
if you're a medical patient too, like imagine creating your own medicine, like out of thin air. It's like alchemy, like modern day alchemy. You're taking light, air, food, water, and you're creating something that's worth more than its weight in gold. I mean, it's your medicine. It's healing you. It's helping you. It's it's changing your life for the better. So to me, it's enjoyable. Like, yeah, you're saving money. Yeah, like, okay, there's no pesticides and mold or, all this crazy stuff that happens. Most weed, by the way, out there in the world, it's overfed. I would say 99%.
Okay.
Overfed, never flushed, not really dried and cured properly, stored improperly, packaged for transport, bundled into like pounds and
balls,
pressed together. Yeah. So, I mean, which is fine. Like I smoke pounds and pounds of that in my life too. But if I want to impress somebody at my house party or whatever, I'm going to open a nice fine jar that's been curing for a while. I might even leave some of the leaf on it too to protect
smell
the bud.
the whole house.
Yeah. I'll open the jar up, trim the leaf off, grind it up, give everyone a sniff of like freshly ground, roll it up, take a dry hit off it. What does that taste like to you? Blah, blah, blah. Then light it up. It's a whole experience,
Definitely.
And so if you care like I do, and like a lot of people I know do, like I feel like you guys do,
100%.
then that's what you want. And you don't get that from a pre-roll that you bought at the, dispensary.
Yeah, I agree.
Most dispensaries.
Well, yeah, most dispensaries.
But I've had great weed at dispensaries, and I'm not putting down that at all either. I'm so happy that there's a weed industry.
Yeah, that's coming.
I'm happy that there's corporations that are cannabis corporations. I'm not anti-corporation. I'm not anti the legal weed business. I think it's great. But again, there's different options for different people, and that's the way it should be.
You touched on people overfeeding. What's one of the biggest misconceptions about growing your own cannabis that you've come across?
Well, as far as overfeeding, it's like the more food you give to the plant, the bigger your buds are going to be. That's a big misconception because, there's a level at which you're going too far and you're overfeeding, and then you see burnt leaf tips, and the plant is now, it's toxic. It has too much minerals and heavy metals and things in the plant system. So, you can flush, for 2 weeks at the end, but if you overfeed for, a month and a half, you're never going to flush all that out over 2 weeks. So, and most of the nutrient companies will tell you like, use, 4, milligrams per gallon. They want you to finish the bottle.
Of course.
They know it's not killing your plant. But they also know, it might not be the healthiest thing. So I tell people, use half strength. And bump it up if you need to. It's always easier to add more than it is to take anything away.
Okay.
So whether it's overfeeding, overwatering, whatever you do, tread lightly. And, if you're underfeeding, you'll see the plant will just go a little lighter green or whatever. You bump it up, it brightens right up, it greens right up. Underwatering, the plant will droop a little. You give it some water, it perks right up within an hour. But you overfeed or you overwater, it's hard to cut back now. Now you got to change everything. You got to flush it all out. You got to deal with a problem that you created. So err on the side of caution. Feed lightly, water lightly. You can always bump it up, but you can't always take away.
So take it for a walk a little bit.
Yeah, but you get to know your plants, when you grow and you do the thing, it's like you lift up the pot, okay, now it's time to water because it's light and I could water now. But if you lift it up and it still feels like, heavy, well, leave it alone. Yeah. It's, they call it weed for a reason. It wants to grow. Sometimes you got to stay out of the way,
You ready for dinner?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing. This is a lot, but
yeah.
So, yeah.
You're listening to the Oven Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. A little barbecue baby back ribs, some coleslaw.
Little gorgonzola. No gorgonzola for Danny. Roll these up a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, you made the mistake. I wore white last week. You got the whites. You got the white shirt this week.
You get the sauce.
It's hot.
I did good last week though.
Wow.
So the infusion on this guy, we make a homemade barbecue sauce.
Wow. That's your sauce?
This is the sauce that Harry whips up.
Oh man.
So Danny, what came first? Your interest in writing or your interest in cannabis?
Wow, that's interesting. My interest in cannabis came first, I would say. But, when I went to school, I went to BU, and I studied sociology.
Hell yeah.
And I learned a lot, just from learning about sociology, and I had to write a lot of papers and things like that. So I kind of learned to write. And I've always been a reader. I read a lot. But I wasn't really technically trained in writing. And then when I got my job at High Times, I was just answering the phone and breaking down boxes and stuff. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. I wasn't like hired to write. I was hired basically because I really wanted to work there, and I knew the people that worked there. They were buying weed from me. Long story short, they wanted me around for whatever reason as well.
It's one way to get your foot in the door.
Those are my dealers and jobs.
It helped. It helped that I had good weed. I can't deny that. I'm sure my personality was fine, but the fact that I had really good weed at like a decent price is not to be discounted. So they, and I was playing for the softball team that they have, the Bong Hitters, and I had worked for another. The Bong Hitters.
The Bong Hitters?
Yeah, well, I had worked for another company called Headcase. There was a hemp hat company. We made hemp baseball hats in the late 90s, like 97, 98. And we were one, besides us and High Times, that was the two, legal companies that had anything to do with like hemp or marijuana anywhere in New York. Like Headcase was in Jersey City, High Times here in Manhattan. And we were an advertiser. Headcase was an advertiser. We made all the hats for all the jam bands and High Times, Cannabis cups, and all the coffee shops over in Amsterdam. One of my first jobs was going over to Amsterdam and bringing hats to all the different
what a job
seed companies and coffee shops and stuff back in the 90s. And I learned a lot back then. I was in my 20s, and I was a grower. But having gone over there, I picked up a lot of seeds and information but the writing came later. Basically I just wanted a job, because I was also growing. The job is, funny enough, was a cover, like you need something to tell someone that what you do.
Yeah.
If you're a grower, you can't just say I grow weed. you had to say, oh, I work for this magazine. So I had a job as a cover, but then eventually the cover job became my real job. And I was traveling so much I had to stop growing. So the cover job kind of took over the real job. And and then all that traveling and everything, I just learned so much over so many trips to Amsterdam, to Vancouver, to California. We would do harvest trips where, you'd rent a car in San Francisco and then drive up to the Emerald Triangle in November and October and visit people's gardens. I mean, these people were like very paranoid, very scared, and like not always super duper happy
that you guys are coming.
People from High Time. So some people were, the people who invited us were happy, but not everybody was always happy. So, that was a interesting part of it too. But the writing thing came about because I felt like writing was easier than like putting up sheetrock and like building grow rooms. And Kyle Cushman, who had worked there and then basically was kind of one of my mentors, he was a writer there. He told me, he said, Dan, you know how to write and you know how to grow. So why don't you just write about growing? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, just write an article. So I wrote an article and it printed in the magazine. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I saw my name in the magazine. It was amazing. It was beautiful. But I was still breaking down boxes and answering the phone. And then little by little, I was like, I'm going to write another article. I'm going to write another article. And then eventually they were like, you're hired. Like, I mean, you already work here, but now you can like write. And that's funny because eventually I figured out I'm going to start a podcast because talking is even easier than writing. Right? So I was like, writing's harder than putting up putting up sheetrock is hard, but writing's easy. But talking, anybody can talk, and if you know your shit, all the better. So it's funny kind of how that worked out, but there really was kind of the writing came about partly kind of just out of necessity, like just I want to stay working here. I want to be relevant. I do know how to grow and I do know how to write, but how can I never had a plan like this is going to be my career. It wasn't even a dream like that. It was just like, I need to do something while I'm growing weed.
Right. How can I continue doing what I enjoy doing?
Yeah. And like, this is the only company I really want to work for because they tell people how to grow weed. And so it's funny, like there was no master plan, it kind of just fell in my lap in a funny way. Like, the reality is, I worked hard. There was deadlines every month. People are like, oh, you work for High Times. You just smoke weed all day. It's like, yeah, we smoke weed all day, but shit has to get done. Like, this magazine has to come out. A book has to come out. A calendar has to come out. Article on the website has to come out. All these things have to happen. You have to create. Right. You can't just sit back and smoke weed. You can smoke weed, have fun, but like get the job done. And so, that's
I feel like that should be anywhere, man.
But that's another thing I tell people too. They're like, how do I get a job, smoking weed? I'm like, the job isn't smoking weed. The job is the job. Yeah. If you can do the job and smoke weed, all the better. That's wonderful. But like, you still got to do the job. You can't.
If we end up getting paid to have infused dinners, I'm with that.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Create a job that you love to do.
And that's not a job.
And if it doesn't exist, create it. Because back then, it was illegal,
Yep.
And people would call me on the phone and be like, hey, I'm growing and I need help. I'm like, I can't help you individually, but I can like write down your question and then put it in the magazine. I'm protected by the First Amendment, but I can't be in a conspiracy with you, Because we were run by lawyers. Right. The company was owned by lawyers. Right. They were like, here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. And we don't want to know about anything that you're doing. Plausible deniability.
I was about to say.
Yeah, they wanted that too. They're like, oh, you're going to Northern California? Great.
Yeah, have fun.
Have fun. When you here's our number. If you have any problems, but when you come back, let us know. That was kind of.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So from High Times, you decided to come out with your own book, Cannabis: A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana.
Yep.
This dropped in what, 2018?
2018. I did one with High Times in 2011, which was a field guide to marijuana strains.
Yep. I love that one.
I did a book. It's dated now, you know, it's old strains, but I did that with them, and then this is my second book, and hopefully I got a third one on the way. I got plans for a third book that I'm going to be working on this year, and hopefully it'll come out in 2024.
Awesome. Nice. Good stuff.
Yeah, and this one's been doing great. I mean, you know, it was meant to just teach people the basics, you know, like entry level. Because the books that I got, you know, from my mentors, Jorge Cervantes, Ed Rosenthal, Kyle, and Bill Drake, and all the books that I read, they were great, and they taught me everything I needed to know. But they were like textbooks. It was like going back to college. It was like, oh my God,
real technical stuff.
Like, yeah, I gotta read all this huge book, and you know, I just want to grow some plants. So
I'm going back to growing in the closet.
Right. So that's, for me, this book was like, you know, how can I teach my grandma how to grow her own 6 plants in her 4x4 tent? You know, how do I get like someone who's reluctant to do it, you know? Because like I said, it's life changing.
Yeah.
When you actually do it and you realize, oh man, every 3 months I can have, you know, a 1/4 pound to a 1/2 pound out of this little tiny space. And then, you know, I got trim, I can make hash, I can make butter, I can infuse meals, I can share with my friends and not even worry about, hey, here's a jar of my homegrown, trade you for your jar, and trade, you know, and like, to me, that's the perfect world. And that's why the first podcast was called Free Weed. Because to me,
I love that name.
It's free. Weed should be practically free. It doesn't, the price of weed, the reason an ounce costs $250, $300 is because of the risk.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's no risk. If there's no risk, it's a plant. It's
right.
It's a flower.
Like
it's a
like
vegetable. Yeah, like anything else, you can grow it in your garden. So the idea of paying, you know, $60 for an 1/8 of an ounce, you know, 3 grams of something. Imagine if anything cost that much. Like, I mean, saffron, which is like the most expensive thing in the world, doesn't even cost that much. It's like, I mean, it's crazy. So, and you can grow it in your garden, and you can have more than enough to ever, you know, you can have more than you can smoke, and you can share. And to me, that's the idea. It should be practically free. And I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad there's a cannabis industry. You can all be millionaires and go, you know, on the stock market and all that other stuff. But for me, like I said, it's a flower, it's a plant, it's a vegetable. We can grow it in our gardens. We can grow it in our 1-bedroom apartments.
Yep.
And I love that you found your passion. I really do. You know, no, I love hearing people who truly enjoy what they're doing.
Family, friends, and then cannabis. For me, it's like that. Like my family.
We need a shirt that says that.
Then friends, and then cannabis. That's my passions right there.
I love that.
And it's exciting. Like I turned 50 last year, and I've seen so much change in the last, you know, 30 years since I got like heavily involved in this. And the idea that we don't have to have fake names. We don't have to hide. We don't have to pretend. We don't, you know, we can tell our kids what we do. We can, you know, it's so special and important. And it's really all about the plant. It's not about me or Jacko or anyone else. We all fought the same fight, and we're all part of the same cause, but the plant is what it's about. And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, let the plant tell you, let it guide you, because don't create celebrities and all these things. Just, you know, to me, you know, entertainment is great. People are great entertainers. I'm a writer. I'm a person that teaches people how to do this thing or whatever. But it's not about me. It's about that. Mm-hmm. It's about the plant. And to me, it's a very special thing. And being able to be a part of that history, it's life-changing and fun. And it gives me purpose.
That's so awesome. You know, it's people like you who, you know, inspire someone who's looking to try something new. Like you said for yourself, you were looking to write this book for someone who's just starting out to, for the first time, grow their own bud, right? And it kind of reminds me of that saying, like, the biggest lie they tell you is it's not that easy. And here you are coming out with a book, and it's a beginner's guide to growing. Getting someone to take that leap or to do something different or do something new that they haven't tried before. I love that part of that.
Yeah, well, it's true, but I would say that it is not that easy. It is a pain in the ass, and you will suffer humiliations. There will be spider mites. There will be thrips. There will be issues with heat. There will be issues with humidity. There will be all kinds of issues. It's just like any other hobby. You know what I mean? Like, it's never going to be perfect or wonderful, but it's always going to be enjoyable. And like, even with all the setbacks, what's funny is everyone's first grow is always really good because they pay perfect attention. Yeah. And then you have that sophomore slump where it's like the second grow where you're like, now I know everything. And then the second grow ends up being like the disaster. And I tell people that too. I'm like, listen, just because you have success the first time, it's because you know, that was your all your effort went into it. You got to keep that energy on the second and third grow, and you're always learning. I'm still learning. You know, I go back and read advice that I gave people 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm like, I would change that. You know, I still do. On the podcast, I used to tell people, use neem oil or whatever. Don't use neem oil anymore. There's certain things like, you know, you learn over time. You got to always be learning, you know, and always be, nobody's the greatest grower on earth. You know, right. No strain is the greatest strain on earth. There's always new things to be discovered. You gotta pop seeds and like learn new stuff and be open to new ideas. Now everything is living soil, like, you know, and to me also, you know, psilocybin and mushrooms are also like something that is like next level plant medicine that's going to help and, you know, teach people. Now I know not nothing, but I know very little about mushroom cultivation, but I want to learn, you know, so that's something I'm interested in. And I think these plants have a lot to teach us, you know, plants and fungus.
Yeah. I feel like the fungi is on the rise. I just heard something on a podcast the other day. I forget which podcast. And it's just like the tremendous benefits of, I can't pronounce the P word for mushrooms. What is it? Psilocybin?
Psilocybin. Right.
That was the first time I ever said that right.
You said it right.
Okay. But just like, you know, getting people off of their antidepressants or their anxiety medications and then putting them through a regimen and then watching these people live happier lives after they've completed the treatment without any more mushroom or without any more medication. That's something to keep an eye on too, and I love hearing stuff like that as well.
Well, people think mushrooms, like, you know, you immediately just go on a trip. Like that's, I think, the problem with, you know, with a lot of, you know, the thoughts on mushrooms, because you can, you know, microdose and it lightens the mood a little bit. You know, it makes you want to wake up and go to work. Right. But, you know, it's not like you take a mushroom and you go on a trip for the next 8 hours.
Yeah, it's about dosage and also set and setting. You know, you have to use the right amount at the right time. But it can certainly change and save and help people tremendously. And even with growing, I mean, all the technology went into indoor lighting and hydroponics and chemical newts and this and that. So, you know, now we're going back to the past and we're like, wait, hold on a second. Let's go back to organic and like living soil and worm farming and building organic material and creating, you know, soil that sustains itself and creates a healthy living plant because the roots are, you know, immersed in, you know, a medium that feeds the roots and everything's in contribution to each other. The fungus and the mycelium and all those things are all working together.
Yeah, it's a perfect harmony.
Yeah. And you just keep building on that. You know, you just add organic material on top and there's less and less nutrients you have to add. And you now have something that's a self-sustaining organism that you can, you know, throw a tomato plant in there and see what happens. You'll get amazing, flavorful, beautiful tomatoes, and it's the same. It's just a plant, but there's plants that are here to help us, and there's fungal things that are here to help us, and we just need to recognize that.
One question I had: do you smoke while you're writing, or is it like a treat when you're done writing?
I mean, I pretty much smoke all the time.
I was gonna say.
But there's times, if I wake up in the morning and I have ideas, I'm not necessarily smoking right off the bat. I get a lot of ideas in the middle of the night, crazily enough. I wake up and I open the phone and my notes and I just start writing stuff down, because some of those are the best ideas. And I find that if I don't write them down, I won't remember them. Even no matter how much I'm like, I'll definitely remember this tomorrow. I won't. I know. I look back and I'm like, fuck, I wish I wrote that down. And now I tell people, write everything down. I tell my son, write it down. It doesn't matter. If you want to delete it, delete it. Mm-hmm. If it's stupid, you wake up in the morning like, what the hell was I thinking? Delete it. But a lot of times, some of the best ideas are coming out of those moments. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I smoke during the day. Now it's the middle of the night. It might have an effect on it. I wake up in the morning, I might have ideas, but I'm pretty much an all day, every day smoker. So most of my stuff comes from smoking. I microdose on occasion. Mm-hmm. I macrodose on much rarer
Very
occasions.
Occasional.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, so every once in a while you got to clear it all out. But, I would say when I'm like writing my book or my writing that I've already done, I'll try to be more clear-headed, just because, you want to get it right and you want to have it, make sure it makes sense, not be too crazy and esoteric. But I have great ideas when I'm high, and I write everything down, and I do a lot of editing.
So to the editing, you're an editor for Northeast Leaf now, correct?
Right.
So, you were talking about change, and what was it like going from High Times to Northeast Leaf, and what was that transition like?
Well, yeah. So High Times got bought in 2017. It was a kind of a family-owned company by the lawyers that I mentioned earlier. And then it got purchased by more of like an investment company that basically ended up moving them to California. So when they moved out to California, that was kind of the beginning of the end for me, because I stayed here on the East Coast. For me, I was like, the industry's moving here, the industry's coming this way. And they wanted me to maybe move out there, and they were going in a kind of a different direction as well. They want to open dispensaries and kind of get involved in going public and things like that. I'm just about teaching people how to grow and kind of covering my local environment. So having stayed out here by about 2000, once the pandemic started and everything, they put me on furlough, and I wasn't really working. So the people from Leaf magazines approached me, and they were like, hey, we'd love to do a magazine for the Northeast region. What do you think? And I was like, wow, okay. So we're going to launch a magazine in the middle of the pandemic and all this. But their vibe was so amazing. They're like us, they're true believers. The Leaf, they've been doing Northwest Leaf in Seattle since 2010. So they've been involved in publishing and cannabis and all that. And then they have Alaska Leaf and California Leaf and Maryland Leaf and Oregon Leaf. So they've reached out to all these regions, and they wanted to do something in the Northeast. And I was like, this is incredible. It feels like, organic, like the way this is coming together. The magazine itself is beautiful. Like, it's big. Mm-hmm. It's free. It's free to the public, which I thought was amazing, because one of the hardest parts of High Times was like selling the magazine. Mm-hmm. Like, you put cover lines on, like 10 pounds in 5 days, whatever you could put on there just to get people to buy it, And meanwhile, this is free. So you don't, there's no hard sell. And
you can get it online.
You can read it online for free. You can read the print magazine for free. And, we're in all the dispensaries here from Maine and Massachusetts all the way to New York and New Jersey. And they believed in me. And I put a team together of like other friends I had from High Times, for ad sales and for web stuff and, just to make it all work. And yeah, it was amazing. And it's been amazing. We're now 3 years in, and, I feel like we're one of the voices of our region, when it comes to cannabis concentrates, weed and wellness. That's that issue. Technology, we've got a lot of different aspects of the industry, and we really just cover basically the entire region. And it was great that we were able to get our foot in the door, because I do think things are changing so rapidly that, there's going to be a lot of other magazines jumping in the next year or two, but we're already here, and like, we're already established. And because New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and all of these states are changing so quick, I'm happy to be like back home to my region doing this thing locally. It feels like, High Times was global, and like Northeast Leaf is very much for the region, but I think the region is super substantial to cannabis in general. I mean, like from Vermont's history and Maine and Massachusetts, and I mean the whole everything, like Chemdog and Sour Diesel and Haze, and all of it. It's all from here. So we have our own rich history that I want to keep alive and keep intact. And as all these corporations come in, I want to make sure that the average person out there in the world has access to decent information about what's available to them, medicinally and recreationally.
Awesome. You guys did a pretty cool cover with so Chef Poole's wife, Shelby, works at Blue Point Brewery. Yeah. And I know you guys did a really cool cover, Northeast Leaf Mag with Blue Point.
Right.
On what? Take us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So that was our tannins and terpenes issue, where we kind of pair tannins and terpenes, which is kind of an interesting thing because, not just alcohol, but, a lot of the things that we consume, everything we consume has tannins, whether it's like orange peels or hops or cannabis, and then terpenes, also orange peels, cannabis, hops. So tannins and terpenes are very closely related, and that's how we smell, what we smell, and that's how we taste what we taste when we consume these products. And so that's our kind of pairing issue, tannins and terpenes. And so we paired the Blue Point toasted lager with some local New York sour diesel that was actually cryo cured. It was freeze dried.
Okay.
So it's like kind of new technology. I mean, old technology. Freeze drying has been going on for years, but freeze drying cannabis is very interesting because you can take a plant that's harvested, just harvested. It was just harvested, but the moisture is pulled out, and it's also very interesting for concentrate makers. So when they're able to do that, and then they get those intact gland heads for terpene preservation, and they don't necessarily need cannabis flowers to be cured before they do their extractions. In fact, it ends up, and sometimes being a darker colored extraction. So for concentrate makers, it's really an amazing new technology.
Cool.
Cryo cure and freeze drying the plant right as at harvest, and then using that to make basically live rosin.
Live rosin.
Yeah.
Everyone's loving live rosin nowadays, man.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I've got my Puffco Peak, and everybody's got their essential tools and dab rigs, and I mean, it's massive. I never anticipated how huge, homemade, American-made concentrates would be, and also edibles. I mean, when I was, I got into this thing, it was just pot brownies was the only edible you made pot butter and you made brownies, and that was it.
That's how we
And
started.
if you took a brownie and it messed you up for hours and hours, that was wild. And one bite sometimes could be. You never knew how powerful they were, or how anything that went into that. And interestingly, with concentrates too, I mean, there's all hash, of course, has been a thing for thousands of years, but not the way we have it now.
Yep.
I mean, that category has changed tremendously with rosin, with ice water extraction, with all the things that have happened with that. I still love import hash as well. I mean,
Okay.
Moroccan, Lebanese, Afghani, like all those traditional places have their terroir, and there are strains that create a specific type of hash from their region. But man, the stuff that people can make these days out of just pure essential oil of cannabis, just the glandular trichomes, all that essential oil that's just in that gland head, extracted and then perfectly preserved, so that we can just do one quick dab and be high for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Incredible. And the flavor that you get out of
it's like you're tasting the actual plant itself.
it's incredible. Yeah. I mean,
You ever done a dab?
You told me I wasn't allowed.
I think I might still hold you to that.
He's been my spotter for anything since we were like 16 years old.
Well, it's not for everybody. That's for sure. I
It's definitely
mean,
not.
it's high powered and intense and strong. But for the people that love it, they love it. And, having judged all these cannabis cups and, for all these years, watching the categories change, like that hash category, we literally had to create new categories. You had to separate it from hash to like solventless hash and solvent hash.
Yeah.
And then solventless hash became, well, there's ice water, and then there's, dry sift, and then there's rosin, and, the categories just,
Endless,
expanded into the endless things, and now the textures, I mean, that's our concentrate issue.
Mhm.
Those are all different types of concentrates on the cover there. But, there's also diamonds and sauce and all these different ways to take this plant and refine it, take all the essential oil. I mean, same as taking an olive and making olive oil.
Mhm.
It's like you press it, you extract the thing that makes it great, and you have that now concentrated, and people love it. And I think it's great.
It makes you think, like, what else would we have like discovered or come up with from the plant if there wasn't so much legislation against it for all these years,
Agreed. I mean, agreed. Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who's a friend, rest in peace, he said that one day people are going to look back at cannabis, as the discovery of cannabis medicine, as akin to the discovery of what is it that I just suddenly spaced on.
It's the food. It's the food.
No, I know, right? What is it that heals you if you have? It's an antibiotic that.
You should know this.
I'll have to cut this, I think.
It's medicinal?
Yeah. But anyway, the point being, like, we're gonna look back at prohibition as like this ridiculous waste of time and energy and people's lives, and we're gonna understand that this plant is here to help us.
Dessert is ready.
You're listening to the Oven Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
All right,
We
dessert.
got this Twinkie now.
Deep fried Twinkie.
Deep fried Twinkie,
I feel like
amazing.
I'm at the Tri-County Fair.
Wow.
I think even a deep fried Twinkie is a little classy for the Tri-County Fair.
You might be right. Especially a deep fried Twinkie like
wow.
this.
Man,
I'm like a little nervous, I can't lie.
Oh man.
that's crazy. We were actually, fun fact about Twinkie. in middle school. We weren't even on the basketball team.
No.
we were the managers for the basketball team. We'd keep the book.
I wasn't allowed to play, and Mario threw up bricks left and right. So he's leaving that out of the story. But I'll let you continue.
I was an awful basketball player. I'll leave it at that. He would come to my basketball games when I was a kid and sit next to my mom, and him and my own mother would be laughing at me in the stands as I'm playing basketball.
You ever see a kid like just not able to slow down? Like he's like full court press, like breakaway, and he throws he goes like for like a simple layup, the ball hits like the foul line off the backboard. You're like, dude, like take like a breakdown step, or whatever how you call it in basketball.
So enough about me and my basketball
You used to
skills.
say spaz, but I don't know if that's
No, you know,
preferred nomenclature anymore.
it's exactly what it is.
I
Yeah.
used to call that a spaz.
Well, we had a coach. Well, we were the managers for a team that had a coach that would give a box of Twinkies for like the player of the game.
Okay.
So that was a little fun fact about a Twinkie.
Who's that, Mr. New?
No, that was
Who's the coach?
Mr. Atkins.
Yeah.
Was Atkins.
But he didn't deep fry, cannabis infused Twinkies, that's for sure.
Man, hopefully he is now. So I had a question. It's a very generic question, but to have the opportunity to ask somebody like yourself, doesn't come very often. So, for me, you said growing weed is, growing pot is so much fun. What's your favorite strain to grow? Like, is there such thing?
Favorite strain to grow, I gotta say, is strawberry cough. It's not the most potent. It's not the, most frosty or the most beautiful, but it is the one that like really, it honestly, I gotta say, it changed my life. I grew it for years. I smoked it for years. It was kind of discovered by Kyle Cushman. I won't say he bred it. He didn't breed it.
Okay.
He found it. A friend of his had like a cross in their room. I believe it was Strawberry Fields and the Colorado Cough. I'm not 100% sure because there's still, like every strain, there's always a lot of crazy rumors and history. But I just love growing it. It's 60 days flowering time, although very sativa dominant, but not a haze, not like the straight haze. Hazy, but not just haze. It had that like kind of perfect balance, perfect hybrid balance, and never hermed out, no issues, no funny business, no, mutations or anything. Just real easy to grow. And one of the things I loved was also no restrictions. Some of the strains when I was growing up, you couldn't share this with anybody. If you got it, you had to keep it. And if you had it, you couldn't share it. And if you shared it, you get ostracized. And, this was a strain that you could share with anybody.
Okay.
And so I did. I shared it with everybody.
With everyone.
Yeah. I loved,
Well, damn. So
I give away clones of it.
You guys shared it at the OMG event in,
That's right.
in Queens.
That's right. Yeah. Cushman came back here to New York for the event, and we all kind of smoked some of that. I just love it. It's electric. It's everything you love about a sativa without the pain in the ass part of growing a sativa, like the finickiness, the long flowering time, the wispy flowers, just the hassles in general. It didn't have the hassles, but it had the high, and it very inspirational, very uplifting, very for a person that's like a creative, writing, trying to make new things, write books, create content. It had that vibe for me. It was very much almost psychedelic, in a way. Yeah, and to me, those are the strains that I love the most. Is those like inspirational, creative,
Definitely
strains. Yeah.
When you guys came to that event, you weren't with me, but these guys came. Him and Kyle Cushman, they spoke, and before Kyle started speaking, he handed out. It had to be 250 like strawberry cough joints, and had everyone light them at the same time. It's like I felt like I was at like a 420 festival all over again. It was awesome. So that's your favorite strain to like grow, smoke.
Favorite to grow. There's so many strains I love to smoke. If I'm not the one growing them, but yeah, like the whole Chem Dog family of strains. is just, for me, it was a game changer. The first time I tried, Chem D, Chem 91, Snow Dogs, Chem Sister, all those strains that came out of like Western Mass. That was amazing. Sour, of course, and haze. There's lots of strains I love to smoke, but strawberry coffee's the one I truly love to grow. But for me, there's strains for the daytime, strains for the nighttime, and I love them all. And there's so many newer versions that I try now where I'm like, oh my God, this is a flavor I never tried before. Recently I had something that was like banana fritter.
I've seen that.
Stuff like that. I'm like, wow, this really does taste like bananas. And like, people think you're crazy, but it really does.
And they smoke it like.
If your palate is in tune to it, you can taste it. And like the GMO, that like garlicky onion thing is so crazy and weird. And with concentrates too, you can, that really also.
Oh, for sure.
Some strains are great for concentrates, and then you smoke the flower and it's totally different. So I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. And even some of the hype strains, I love gelato and cookies. Yeah, certs. There's a lot of the banana.
Golden State Banana.
Banana.
Yeah, Nick's a good dude.
Yeah.
How was that cookies opening? You were there for that, right?
I wrote about the opening of the shop there. It's amazing just to see like a 5-story shop with a roof deck right in Midtown Manhattan.
Blue.
All
blue building.
Yeah. We had to hide those places for so many years, and now to see them, bright and shiny in the center of the city is amazing, and once the licensing comes through and that becomes a legit shop, place to consume and chill, I think it's going to really, change the city way for the better, and really create a place for people to come from all over the world.
Definitely. One more for you. Just going back on, cookies and what you've been on. Have you ever, thought of starting up your own brand, or like, because I know making your own strain, right? We talked about Kyle didn't engineer strawberry cough, but how do you, so like when you make a strain, you just have to, it's all like word of mouth, right? It's not like there's a book that you write it in, like copyright.
Right. You create the name, but it's got to be something good.
Yep.
And it's got to be something new and different. And you don't get something new and different without crossing things that are very different from each other. So, that F1 hybrid comes from 2 very distinctly different strains that are crossed together to make something new. But again, not every seed that comes out of that is going to be that new, amazing, fantastic thing. In fact, 1 out of 1,000 or 10,000 might be the one. Really? So you have to grow them out into large populations to find that new thing. And so that's what the breeders do. That's why it's so hard for, the average Joe like us to create a new strain. You don't do that in a 4x4 tent.
Yeah.
You do that with large populations.
Pheno hunters.
Pheno hunting. Finding that perfect new, different thing that's going to be, and then you put your name on it, you can do whatever you want, but if it's not different and new, then it's just the same old thing with a different name.
With a different name.
Right. So that's what's so cool about cannabis is we're only scratching the surface. Every seed that pops is a new thing that can be totally different, and could be, this one could smell like cinnamon, who knows, you could get the cinnamon strain, or you could get the whatever. But you won't get that without popping new strains.
Yep.
And that means, you have to also not necessarily do that with autos or feminized. You need regular seeds that might be male, might be female, but those will come out with something brand new. And that's what's interesting too. We're gonna find a lot of cool new things out there. Definitely. That have never been discovered.
It's exciting, man.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be a part of this, to be a part of this game. So
I'm feeling it right now.
You're feeling it?
Yeah. Mia, you gotta ask your question. I'm in great shape.
My question for you is, you were talking about how sometimes it's better to go to the dispensary, but for some people it's better to grow your own. Do you think that somebody working like a 40-hour work week with a family would be able to grow their own, or do you think that that's a little bit too?
Well, it's definitely a commitment, right? You need to spend at least an hour a day or so with your plants if you want them to thrive and survive. So you do have to set that time aside. But most people have an hour a day that they can do that with. And, that could be in the morning, it could be in the evening. It all depends on your schedule. But most people can do it. And if you can't, the key is not everybody's going to grow their own, but there can also be like a collective and a co-op kind of situation, a cooperative, where like, okay, maybe you don't grow, but you have something that you bring to the table that you share with someone else, and they share their cannabis that they grow. Maybe you grow carrots, or maybe you do kickboxing classes, and you trade a kickboxing class for an eighth of cannabis, or whatever it might be. But there is certainly ways for people to communicate with each other now that we have all the internet and social media and all these ways of communicating. There's ways to make that work for you, so that like, if you don't grow your own and you never plan on doing it ever again, you can still take advantage of homegrown cannabis by participating in that type of cooperative, or that kind of farmer's market idea that I mentioned too, where it's like, okay, here's 10 local farmers with their jars of cannabis on the table, and 10 people who make their own honey, and 10 people who have this and that and the other, and they all kind of set up their tables, and you buy from who you want. And I've seen this at these sessions and these kind of underground events that people have. And I think that's something important that we need to keep alive, And so for the person who wants to go to the dispensary, perfect, great. You want a gummy, you want a vape pen, you want some mass-produced flower or concentrates, that's fine. And you're not as into it as I am. You know what I mean? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm so deeply into it that I want something better, and I want the highest quality, and I want that small batch, living soil, organic, KMF, like higher end thing. And I'm willing to pay a little extra or trade my own, what I do for it. And so I envision a future where it's like that, where everyone has their options. And so even if you don't grow your own, you can still benefit from homegrown or purchase something that's locally grown or trade for it. But if you have such a tight schedule, or if you, like I said, my grow career ended because I traveled so much, because every weekend or every month I would have to go somewhere and go away. And you can't do that and keep, plants alive indoors, like high quality, like that, and go away all the time. So if you can't do it, you need someone else to do it for you. But most people can, have an hour a day that they could devote to home grow, but you have to really love it and care. You really do. I mean, it's not even like having like a fish tank. It's like kind of like having a saltwater fish tank. You know what I mean? Like it's a little extra.
Yeah.
Fish tank you can leave alone. It's like a cat you can leave alone for a weekend. A dog you can't leave it alone for a weekend. It's like a dog. You do have to spend. There's a certain amount of time you have to devote to it all the time. But the dog gives you back, its energy.
Lots of love.
Lots of love. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like it is work, and it's not. It's a little bit between a hobby and a part-time job.
A superpower wise, while I'm smoking?
Yeah, it only lasts as long as if you were smoking, or it has the same.
Oh man, I mean, I feel like I use the same answer for every time I get asked for my superpower. I would just love to, it's so basic too. I would love to be invisible. I think it would be
really invisible.
I think it would be so.
That's the worst one of all.
Like either invisible, like
oh my god,
Nobody knows you're there.
Invisible. Oh, you can only do bad things. Nothing good can come from being invisible.
Can I retract my answer?
No, I want to fly. No, Invisible's cool.
I was going
I mean,
Easy.
I don't know. To me, what Invisible is like, it's wrong. There's nothing good. Nothing good can come of being invisible.
I thought for sure that was gonna be a hit too.
It's a hit. Like, it's a hit.
So yours would be flying?
I'd like to fly. I don't know. I think that'd be fun.
I think that kind of goes hand in hand, smoking and flying. So that's actually a really good answer.
But Invisible is like,
Yeah,
what?
Don't put that in. I'd rather teleport. I'd rather teleport or something.
No, leave it. I was thinking like the
All right, so we're starting a new piece to our podcast here. This segment is called The Oven.
The oven squared.
So some questions are a little spicy, some are a little more straightforward. It's all just random thoughts that come into our head throughout the day. My head mostly. I got a lot of messed up thoughts. Frank will get a random text every now and then, and he'll just kind of wonder what I'm doing with my day. So I'm going to pull one out, and you'll give us your answer.
Sounds good.
We're hoping for a not too spicy one.
This one's not spicy. This one's not spicy. Is someone's coffee order assumed hot unless they specifically say iced?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. And if you say cold brew, then definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, cold brew is cold. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a hot cold brew. But if you say just like coffee with milk, you're getting hot coffee. You're not getting
Hot
iced.
coffee.
Yeah, I mean, you have to say
I agree.
iced. You have to say iced.
Yeah, I like placed an order at work one time, and Alexa, I love you. I placed an order at work, and the girl comes back. I said, I'll have a black coffee, 2 sugars. She comes back with a black coffee, 2 sugars, just iced. I would have said
Was it the
iced,
middle
I
of
want
summer?
iced coffee.
Yeah, I was going to ask what.
Yeah.
How is the weather?
It kind of, the weather depends too.
I mean, if I'm drinking coffee, I'm drinking iced coffee all year round anyway.
I think it was the fall.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm drinking iced coffee most of the time, unless it's freezing cold. But if it's freezing cold, I mean, it's got to be hot coffee. But yeah, even if it's warm, it's got to be hot coffee if you don't say anything. And then otherwise, ice is, you got to mention, I want it on ice.
Okay.
Yeah. You pay extra for ice too. I mean, that's extra. Iced coffee is more expensive than hot coffee, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah, I think you're right. I think so. Yeah. All right.
And then if you want it infused, it's a whole other story.
7-Eleven, get on there.
We're kind of wrapping up here. I just wanted to ask, do you have anything coming up? I know you do, a lot of grow classes, you do a lot of seminars, stuff like that. So
Yeah. I'm doing some grow classes in February at Work and Roll in Manhattan, and I'm trying to do as much of those as I can possibly do. Ultimately, I want to get some sponsors so I can do them for free, because I'd love to have like the sponsors pay for it, just like the magazine. The advertisers pay for the magazine, but the magazine is free. I want to do the grow classes paid for by the sponsors and have the classes be free. And, you get a copy of my book, and you learn how to grow your own, home grow. All very basic, all entry level. Ultimately, I'd love to, start a school of some kind just to teach people how to grow their own. And I got another book in the works, basically more on maximizing each plant, getting the most out of each plant. Because the funny thing is like, yeah, they legalize home grow, but they're like, you can only grow 6 plants.
Yeah.
Or you can grow 12 plants. But the limit is on the amount of plants. It's not on the size of the plants.
Yeah.
So you can grow bigger plants.
You
need a longer veg time, and you need a little more space, and you need, a little more root system. But there's no limit on the size of each plant. And from 6 plants, you can grow a lot, if you make bigger plants. So, yeah, I just want to teach people how to sort of maximize each plant,
Cool.
And that's the next book. That's the plan for that. And then just keep doing the magazine, the podcast, Grow Bud Yourself. We're on episode 106 right now, all free to listen to. We try to interview people who will teach you how to grow or how to breed your own strains, or, create something new. And people from the political world, people from the entertainment community, and people from, of course, cannabis, breeders and seed producers and growers.
Oh yeah. My last thing for you, man, is I saw you wrote up the Edibles Hall of Fame.
Right.
I got a nice fat care package over here for you that I hope is gonna ease our way into the next edition.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I've already got like a short list of the next nominees for that as well. I know, there are a lot of people want to be involved, and that's, I started the Seed Bank Hall of Fame at High Times for like people who create, the breeders who created the strains that we're smoking. And, we've always done the cannabis cups to try to find what are the best strains and all of that. With Leaf Magazine, we do the Leaf Bowl. It's our Leaf Bowl. It's like our version of a cannabis event to find the best strains, best concentrates, best edibles. And yeah, with edibles, it was interesting. I put that together and introduce people to some of the originators of kind of the edible scene, Brownie Mary and Watermelon, and people who were involved in the early days of that. And I do think it's important just to kind of remember the history, honor the people who sacrificed during the days when, man, like I said, you could go to jail, you could get arrested, you could get raided, you could have your family torn apart. And that's the thing people need to remember. Like, we're having fun, we're enjoying ourselves and everything, but we do it on the backs of the people, the pioneers who came before us and fought that fight when it wasn't, an easy fight to fight. It wasn't legal. It was very frowned upon. People could have their careers destroyed. And so, it is important to remember the hard fight that happened. It's important for people to remember too. Like, everybody is like, oh, it's corporate, it's legal. I wish it was still illegal. Don't wish it was still illegal. Do not wish it was still illegal. I know there's a nostalgia for the way things were, but if you ever knew people who got locked up, if you ever understood all the bad things that happened, the dogs that were shot, the families that were torn apart, you certainly wouldn't wish that it was still illegal. That thing that you love about those days can still be alive. You just need to want that. You need that. You vote with your dollar. You vote with your dollar. Where you spend your money, what you choose to support is what will stay alive. Everybody says like, oh, the media, controls this and the government controls that. No, the people control everything. The media doesn't know anything. I'm part of the media. They don't know anything. All they want to do is feed you what you want. So if you tell them you want something different, that's what they'll feed you. Don't let people off the hook. The people, you're on the hook. You are on the hook. It's not anybody else's fault. You get what you want. If you want something different, you will get something different. So that's the key to this. Cannabis is legal, and yes, it's corporate, but if you spend your money on the cannabis you want, you will get the cannabis you want. If you spend the money elsewhere, you will get something else. And that's the way it is. So don't let anybody forget that the past was awful. I grew weed when it was scary. It was fear. We were in fear for our lives. We were in fear. I wasn't even scared to get busted. I was scared to get robbed. I was scared to get guns put in my face. And who could I go to? Nobody. So the reality is, yes, it's overregulated. Yes, it's overtaxed. Yes, it's a bunch of bullshit mids. Yes, all the things. You're right about everything, but what you're not right about is that it should go back to the way it was. Because it should not go back to the way it was. And if you were there, you know why.
Danny Danko, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out his book, check out his podcast, Grow Bud Yourself. He's also on Instagram at Danny Danko HT.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. What a meal. What a pleasure. Thank you guys for this. It's been amazing. The oven.
Man. And hey, you let us know about with that sponsorship.
Absolutely.
Grow Bud.
Absolutely. Thank you.
NYPD. We're always here for you, brother.
Awesome. Thank you.
We want to thank Chef Harry Poole and his team over at Jackson's Restaurant in Comac, New York for another amazing infused meal. Make sure you check out our YouTube page, click the subscribe button, and join us next time, because there's always an open seat for you at the oven.